First, Terence Irwin's Nicomachean Ethics, for Walter Starkey's Don Quixote, and then Mr. and Mrs. Bumble and Monks. The Aristotle goes fast, just like a minute. At the very beginning, every craft and every line of inquiry, and likewise every action and decision, seems to seek some good. That is why some people were right to describe the good as what everything seeks. But the ends that are sought appear to differ. Some are activities, and others are products apart from the activities. Wherever there are ends apart from the actions, the products are by nature better than the activities. Since there are many actions, crafts, and sciences, the ends turn out to be many as well. For health is the end of medicine, a boat of boat-building, victory of generalship, and wealth of household management, but some of these pursuits are subordinate to some one capacity. For instance, bridle-making and every other science producing equipment for horses are subordinate to horsemanship, while this and every action in warfare are, in turn, subordinate to generalship. And in the same way, other pursuits are subordinate to further ones. In all such cases, then, the ends of the ruling sciences are more choice-worthy than all the ends subordinate to them, since the lower ends are also pursued for the sake of the higher. Here it does not matter whether the ends of the actions are the activities themselves, or something apart from them, as in the sciences we have mentioned. Suppose, then, continuing, that the things achievable by action have some end that we wish for because of itself, and because of which we wish for the other things, and that we do not choose everything because of something else. For if we do, it will go on without limit, so that desire will prove to be empty and futile. Clearly this end will be the good, that is to say, the best good. Then, does knowledge of this good carry great weight for our way of life, and would it make us better able, like archers who have a target to aim at, to hit the right mark? If so, we should try to grasp and outline at any rate what the good is, and which is its proper science or capacity. It seems proper to the most controlling science, the highest ruling science, and this appears characteristic of political science, for it is the one that prescribes which of the sciences ought to be studied in cities, and which ones each class in the city should learn, and how far, indeed, we see that even the most honored capacities, generalship, household management, and rhetoric, for instance, are subordinate to it. And since it uses the other sciences concerned with action, and moreover legislates what must be done and what avoided, its end will include the ends of the other sciences, and so this will be the human good. For even if the good is the same for a city as for an individual, still the good of the city is apparently a greater and more complete good to acquire and preserve. For while it is satisfactory to acquire and preserve the good even for an individual, it is finer and more divine to acquire and preserve it for people and for cities. And so, since our line of inquiry seeks these goods for an individual and for a community, it is a sort of political science. Don Quixote, chapter 45, in which the controversy of Mambrino's helmet and the pack saddle is decided, with other happenings all quite true. Now, gentlemen, cried the barber, what do you think of those who still hold that this is not a basin, but a helmet? If anyone says the contrary, said Don Quixote, I will make him know, if he is a knight, that he is lying, and if he's a squire, that he is lying 1,000 times. Our own barber, who was present all this time, knew Don Quixote's humor, and he had a mind to encourage his folly, and carry the jest further to make them laugh. So he addressed the other barber as follows: Sir Barber, or whoever you are, know that I am also of your profession, that I hold a certificate for more than 20 years, and that I am well acquainted with all the instruments of the barber's art, every one of them. Moreover, in my youth, I was a soldier, and I know what a helmet is like, and a morion, and a close casque, and other kinds of soldier's gear. Therefore I say, always subject to better judgment, that this piece before us, which this good gentleman holds in his hand, not only is not a barber's basin, but is as far from being one as black is from white, and truth from falsehood. It is a helmet, though, in my opinion, not a complete one. No, truly, said Don Quixote, it lacks half, namely, the beaver. That's true, said the curate, who perceived his friend's intention, and Cardenio, Don Fernando, and his companions affirmed likewise. Even the judge would have taken part in the prank if he had not been so preoccupied with Don Luis's affair. But he was so immersed in his thoughts that he paid little or no attention to these trivialities. Lord save us, cried the befooled barber. Is it possible that so many honorable gentlemen should say this is not a basin, but a helmet? Sure, this is enough to strike a whole university dumb with amazement, no matter how wise it be. Enough said. If this basin is a helmet, then this pack-saddle must be a horse's trappings, as this man has said. To me, it looks like a pack-saddle, said Don Quixote, but I've already said that I will not interfere in the matter. Whether it be a pack-saddle or trappings, said the curate, it is only Don Quixote who can say, for in these matters of chivalry all these gentlemen and myself bow to his knowledge. By heaven, gentlemen, said Don Quixote, so many strange and unaccountable things have befallen me in this castle, on the 2 occasions I have stayed here, that I would not dare to make a positive affirmation concerning anything contained in it, for I imagine that everything here works by enchantment. On the first occasion, a Moorish magician in the castle troubled me greatly, and Sancho suffered at the hands of certain of his followers. And last night, I was left hanging by this arm for close on 2 hours, without knowing how or why I fell into that mischance. Therefore, it would be rash on my part to interfere in so perplexing a business. For those who say this is a basin, and not a helmet, I have given my answer. But I will leave it to others to decide whether this be a pack-saddle or the trappings of a horse. Perhaps, as none of you have been dubbed knights, the spells in this place may have no effect on you. Your understanding will be free, and you'll be able to judge of the affairs of this castle as they really and truly are, and not as they appear to me. There is no doubt, Don Fernando replied, that Don Quixote has spoken very wisely in saying that the decision in this case rests with us, and so that it may be proceeded with in sound foundations, I shall take the votes of these gentlemen in secret, and give you a full and clear account of the result. All this was the subject of great laughter to those who knew Don Quixote's humor, but to those who did not, it seemed the greatest nonsense in all the world, especially to the 4 travelers who had arrived at the inn early in the morning, and to 3 others who had just arrived, and who had the appearance of officers of the Holy Brotherhood, as in fact they were. But he who despaired most of all was the barber whose basin had been transformed before his very eyes into the helmet of Mambrino, and whose pack-saddle would doubtless turn into the rich trappings of a horse. All of them laughed to see how Don Fernando took their votes, whispering in their ear, so that they might declare in secret if that precious object they had quarreled so much about were a pack-saddle or horse trappings. After he had taken the votes of those who knew Don Quixote, he said in a loud voice, The truth is, my good man, that I'm tired of asking so many opinions, for no sooner did I ask what I want to know than they answer me that it is absurd to say that this is an ass's pack saddle and not the trappings of a horse, and of a well-bred horse at that. So you must have patience. In spite of you and your ass, this is not a pack saddle but horse trappings, and you have conducted your case very badly. May I never have a share in heaven, cried the barber, if all you gentlemen be not deceived. Likewise, may my soul appear to God as this pack saddle appears to me, a pack saddle, and not horse trappings. But laws go as kings will. I'll say no more, and in truth I'm not drunk, nor have I broken my fast, sinner though I be. It's a trying thing, waiting supper for lovers, said Mr. Grimwig, waking up and pulling his pocket handkerchief from over his head. Truth to tell, the supper had been waiting a most unreasonable time. Neither Mrs. Maylie, nor Harry, nor Rose, who all came in together, could offer a word in extenuation. I had serious thoughts of eating my head tonight, said Mr. Grimwig, for I began to think I should get nothing else. I'll take the liberty, if you'll allow me, of saluting the bride that is to be. Mr. Grimwig lost no time in carrying this notice into effect upon the blushing girl, and the example, being contagious, was followed both by the doctor and Mr. Brownlow. Some people affirm that Harry Maylie had been observed to set it, originally, in a dark room adjoining, but the best authorities consider this downright scandal, he being young and a clergyman. Oliver, my child, said Mrs. Maylie, where have you been, and why do you look so sad? There are tears stealing down your face at this moment. What is the matter? It's a world of disappointment, often to the hopes we most must cherish, and hopes that do our natures the greatest honor. Poor Dick was dead. As he discharged himself of this pleasantry, Mr. Bumble took his hat from a peg, and putting it on rather rakishly on one side as a man might, he felt he had asserted his superiority in a becoming manner, thrust his hands into his pockets, and sauntered towards the door with much ease and waggishness depicted in his whole appearance. Now, Mrs. Corney, that was, had tried the tears, because they were less troublesome than a manual assault, but she was quite prepared to make trial of the latter mode of proceeding, as Mr. Bumble was not long in discovering. The first proof he experienced of the fact was conveyed in a hollow sound, immediately succeeded by the sudden flying off of his hat to the opposite end of the room, this preliminary proceeding laying bare his head. The expert lady, clasping him tightly round the throat with one hand, inflicted a shower of blows, dealt with singular vigor and dexterity upon it with the other. This done, she created a little variety by scratching his face and tearing his hair, and having by this time inflicted as much punishment as she deemed necessary for the offense, she pushed him over a chair, which was luckily well situated for the purpose, and defied him to talk about his prerogative again if he dared. "Get up," said Mrs. Bumble in a voice of command, "and take yourself away from here, unless you want me to do something desperate." Mr. Bumble rose with a very rueful countenance, wondering much what something desperate might be. Picking up his hat, he looked towards the door. "Are you going?" demanded Mrs. Bumble. "Certainly, my dear, certainly," rejoined Mr. Bumble, making a quicker motion towards the door. "I didn't intend to. I'm going, my dear. You're very violent. That really At this instant, Mrs. Bumble stepped hastily forward to replace the carpet, which had been kicked up in the scuffle. Mr. Bumble immediately darted out of the room, without bestowing another thought on his unfinished sentence, leaving the late Mrs. Corney in full possession of the field. Mr. Bumble was fairly taken by surprise, and fairly beaten. He had a decided propensity for bullying, derived no inconsiderable pleasure from the exercise of petty cruelty, and consequently was, it is needless to say, a coward. This is by no means a disparagement to his character, for many official personages who are held in high respect and admiration are the victims of similar infirmities. The remark is made, indeed, rather in his favor than otherwise, and with a view of impressing the reader with a just sense of his qualifications for office. But the measure of his degradation was not yet full. After making a tour of the house, and thinking for the first time that the poor laws really were too hard on people, that men who ran away from their wives, leaving them chargeable to the parish, ought, in justice, to be visited with no punishment at all, but rather rewarded as meritorious individuals who had suffered much, Mr. Bumble came to a room where some of the female paupers were usually employed in washing the parish linen. I don't like the sound of that sentence. When the second sound of Stephen voices in conversation now proceeded. Said Mr. Bumble, summoning up all his native dignity. These women at least shall continue to respect the prerogative. Hello there. What do you mean by this noise, you hussies? With these words, Mr. Bumble opened the door and walked in with a very fierce and angry manner, which was at once exchanged for a most humiliated and cowering air, as his eyes unexpectedly rested on the form of his lady wife. "My dear," said Mr. Bumble, "I didn't know you were here." "Didn't know I was here," repeated Mrs. Bumble. "What dog?" The events narrated in the last chapter were, to make a long story short, but 2 days old, when Oliver Leford found himself at 3 o'clock in the afternoon was in a traveling carriage rolling fast towards his native town. Mrs. Maylai and Rose, Mrs. Bedwin, and the good doctor were with him, and Mr. Brownlow followed in a post-chaise, accompanied by one other person. They had not talked much upon the way, for Oliver was in a flutter of agitation and uncertainty which deprived him power of collecting his thoughts, and almost of speech, and to all intents appeared his companion shared it, in at least an equal degree. He and the two ladies were very carefully made acquainted by Mr. Brow with the criminal nature of the strange monks, and although they knew that the object of their present journey was to complete the work which had begun, still the whole matter was enveloped in doubt and mystery, to leave them in endurance of suspended closure. With Mr. Losborne's assistance, Mr. Brow had also cautiously stopped all channels of communication by which the Malays could naysay Oliver to him, and laying his hand upon his head, "Is your half-brother, the illegitimate son of your father, Edwin Leford, my dear friend? You'll be kind and good to him, for you are to everyone," said Oliver. "It will make you cry, I know, to hear what he can tell, but never mind, it will be all over, and you will smile again, I know, to think how changed he is. You did the same with me." "He said God bless you when I ran away," cried the boy with a burst of affectionate emotion, "and I'll say God bless you now, and show him how I love him for it." Approaching the town, at length driving through its narrow streets, it became matter of no small difficulty to restrain the boy within reasonable bounds. There was Sowerberry's the undertaker's, just as it used to be, only smaller and less imposing in appearance than he remembered it. There were all the well-known shops and houses, with almost every one of which he had some slight incident connected. There was Gamefield's cart, the very cart he used to have, standing at the public house door. There was the workhouse, the dreary prison of his youthful days, with its dismal windows frowning on the street. There was the same lean porter standing at the gate, at sight of whom Oliver involuntarily shrunk back, and then laughed at himself for being so foolish, then cried, then laughter again. There were scores of faces at the doors and windows that he knew quite well. There was nearly everything as if he had left it, but yesterday, and all his recent life had been irregardless but a happy dream. But it was pure, earnest, joyful reality. Even as they drove straight to the door of the chief hotel, which Oliver used to stare up at with awe and think a mighty palace, but which had somehow fallen off in grandeur and size. And here was Mr. Grimwig all ready to receive them, kissing the young lady, and the old one too, when they got out of the coach as if he were the grandfather of the whole party, all smiles and kindness, and not offering to eat his head, no, not once. Not even when he contradicted a very old postboy about the nearest road to London, and maintained he knew it best, though he had only come that way once, and that time fast asleep. There was dinner prepared, and there were bedrooms ready, and everything was arranged as if by magic. Notwithstanding all this, when the hurry of the first half-hour was over, the unsettled silence, the constraint prevailed that had marked their journey down. Mr. Brownlow did not join them at dinner, but remained in a separate room. At table, the two other gentlemen hurried in and out with anxious faces, and during the short intervals when they were present, conversed apart the rest. Once, Mrs. Maylai was called away, and after being absent for nearly an hour, returned with eyes swollen with weeping. Okay, alright, I'm gonna sing. White cane lying in a gutter in the lane. If you're walking home alone, don't let it bring you. We're talking about the space between us all and the people who hide themselves behind a wall of illusion. Never glimpse the truth, then it's far too late when they pass away. We were talking about the love we all could share when we find it, to try our best to hold it there with our love. With our love we could save the world if they only knew. Try to realize it's all within yourself. No one else can make you change. And to see you're really only very small, and life flows on within you and without you. We were talking about the love that's gone so cold, and the people who gain the world and lose their soul. They don't know. They can't see